What's up, PlayStation Universe, and welcome to episode 34 of PlayStation Fix. My name is Will Robinson, and joining me this week we got Kyle Prawl.
Hey, bud.
And we got a very special guest this week. We got Tim Noons, one of our other senior editors.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Tim, I think you have the honor of maybe being our first special guest. Is that right?
Yep, he definitely is.
Someone outside the usual cast.
Yeah.
Oh, well, great. Thanks for having me, guys.
But yeah, you'll see Tim stuff all over PSU if you pay attention to any of the news and reviews. Speaking of reviews, we got him on here pretty specially to give us his insight and knowledge to I Am Setsuna, which just came out. So before we dive into that, the whole theme of this podcast now, we're changing it up a little bit with what we're going to be doing from now on. We want to do some more in-depth discussions on some bigger topics around the industry and different things going on there. So this week we're going to talk about kind of the state of the JRPG and where it's at. The classic old school JRPGs, like the ones that we all grew up with and remember very fondly, and some very angrily, depending on difficulty of the game. So, and I Am Setsuna is a game that set out to do just that. It came out, was developed by Tokyo RPG Factory, which is a new studio that was created under Square Enix, and their whole mission in life is to create old school JRPGs. Yeah. That will basically be as good or better, hopefully, is their goal, than some of the games that we grew up and loved playing. So their first game that they came out with was I Am Setsuna, which I got to play at E3, and I loved my time with it there. But Tim got to review it, so I'm going to pass the mic off and let Tim talk about his initial thoughts and where he ended up falling after beating the game. So here you go, Tim.
Well, it's funny that you bring up falling because I fell quite often. What really kind of took me was the charm of it, and one of the things that made a lot of older games special for me, especially since that was right around the time I had jumped into gaming, was that the narrative was simple, but it wasn't just like, I'm going here, let's do this, press A to feel something. I had to throw that in there. But, it's not like little things like that. It's, little bits of character development here. You don't really know what the importance is until you get to certain points and you go, that was there, that was here, and you get this full realization. And it seems like all of these things were in the background up until certain points, and it's just that integrity of development. And it's not just for the characters either, it's just for the whole spiel. And it's still simple, but it's still so well articulated, and that comes through quite a bit with I Am Setsuna. And what also comes through, not right away, which is great because it gives you a little time to maneuver and finagle your situation and figure out exactly what you need to do when the time comes. But the boss battles are unforgiving.
I remember reading that. That was a major point in your review.
Unforgiving in that just the sort of like, you don't know, I'm not telling you why you're losing, sort of like almost Dark Souls-y, if there is such an adjective. But whatever. But you sit and you fight with these things. I remember the first fight that really just decimated me was, my God, this wolf. And I don't want to go too far into it.
Oh my God, this wolf, man.
Man, it was a good 25 attempts.
Against a wolf? Holy crap.
And not just a wolf, not like just a random thing I came across in the game. It's a wolf. I'm not going to go too far into it. It's just going to be vague. It was a wolf thing. Yeah. Werewolf, actually.
Oh, that makes more sense.
But this werewolf, right? I'm fighting this thing, and there's an absolutely crazy attack speed. And it has these crazy combo attacks, and I after the first few times going in, I'm thinking, okay, I think I can do this. I just got to keep someone healing Setsuna, just keep healing. We'll do this, and I have, is it Aetherna? The name kind of always just threw me off when I was trying to say it. But she has a very quick ATB. So I was thinking, well, if I can just keep her doing damage, and then I can kind of isolate and pull tension the other direction. It never worked. this boss just kept attacking way too quickly, and the combos were way too devastating. If he looked once at Setsuna with an attack, she'd be down.
Jeez.
Wow. So you basically had to beat it by sheer mathematical force, right? I mean, just level up enough that you eventually like overpowered it.
I thought that was going to do it too. Uh, but with and it helped. It certainly helped, but it didn't just do it on its own. The real trick is being able to manipulate your sprint knights. It's just the system for taking in passive and active abilities, and in doing so, you give yourself more options to find different ways of beating bosses and fighting enemies and things like that, combos and stuff if you will too. But I I had to find ways to break him down. I couldn't really slow him down because my stop never worked. My God, that sucked. The only character at the time that could use stop for me was Aetherna, and she has a very small mana pool, and the spell costs like 40. So I had maybe 3 attempts before my mana was completely gone. And it only worked 1 in 3 times.
30% chance, as you will.
Yeah. And it seemed to be a regular thing. Like it worked the first time. After that, it wouldn't work for 2 times. So it's long story short, you have all of these contingencies and all these things that aren't told to you. You have the tutorial that goes well. That it's, by the way, which is, I didn't really actually talk about that a lot in the review, but the way that things are explained is very intuitive. They do a very good job of it. They give you all the tools, all the instructions for using those tools, but they don't tell you how to fight these people. And,
I did, yeah. I got to play through the very beginning of the game when I was at E3, so I did go through the whole tutorial part, and that was very, very. It held your hand, not in like an annoying way, but it did really help inform you. But I could see how like, as soon as you jump into that, like when I got a little bit farther, it was just like they gave you no hints.
right? Just long enough for you to find your way to the kindergarten class so you can finger paint.
Yeah.
It's pretty much where it is.
So actually, before we go any further, I realized I didn't even talk about the premise of the game. So this is, let's see, I'm trying to think of where this goes. But basically, is Endir is the name of the guy, right?
Mhm.
He is basically a soldier that just kind of, you start the game with him, and then he gets paid. I guess he gets hired to go after and find this girl
Mhm.
that he's supposed to kill. And it turns out to be Setsuna, the girl that the game is named after, and then she has to go on a mission. She's been selected to be the sacrifice for these, to save, basically keep order in the world. Is that kind of the premise of it?
Yep, it's rather Final Fantasy X like in that sense. But yes.
Okay. So, and then this game is, like we said, old school JRPG. If you didn't hear from the conversation we had, it is, said ATB. People are unfamiliar with that, active time battle.
Sure.
Just so meaning that there's it's not constant action. There's set time limits per, like cooldowns basically for each person that before they can use an ability again. But you were saying that the wolf just had a really quick one for them. Like,
Oh man, even with Aetherna, her ATB was the fastest I've had, still the fastest I've had in this whole game. But he was splitting that in half. He was doing pretty much 2 attacks
Jeez.
per one of hers.
See, that just
Nuts.
seems ridiculous to me. I've never played a different game that was that just did that with a boss.
But it's so cool though in the sense like once
Yeah.
I was done, I felt so good.
Oh,
I
sure.
felt so good. I went to the closest save point, by the way, but I felt so good when I was done, and that's how it's been with every boss since then. Like they all have a different strategy, a different focus. Like the one, I think it's 3 bosses after that. He keeps spawning creatures, and he keeps throwing these devastating attacks. So you have to not only juggle the playing field so that things don't get too crazy, but you also have to somehow withstand his damage and whittle him down.
Jeez. So were all the encounters, for at least for the bosses anyway, would you say they were all pretty unique experiences? Like did they put a lot of effort into making them individualized instead of just being like, here's another boss, here's another boss?
I say particular ones, yes.
Okay.
The more of the narrative effective ones, like all of them were part of the storyline,
Sure.
but like ones that were like key characters, key situations, things like that. You came across some bosses that could be just done with like well, I guess for lack of a better term right now, tank and spank
Sure.
technique. But
Kyle knows all about that tank and spank.
Final
life.
Fantasy. But yeah, it's not every boss is like that, and sometimes you have to fight wave after wave after wave before you get to those bosses too. So it's kind of nice to have a rather routine boss when you're kind of on the end of your resources. But still, yeah, not everyone is crazy like that, but there are still plenty of them.
Yeah. All right. So, escaping the crazy difficulty of some of the enemies you encounter, just like generally walking through the world. I remember you saying one of your negatives on the review was saying that there was no world map to be able to explore, so you just had to kind of remember where you were going as you're exploring From what I saw anyway, I only got to play about an hour with it, but it's immediately started to feel like it was getting more diverse, or fairly diverse environments going through it, which I liked a lot. And the monsters in the world are visible when you're running around, and it's like the classic thing of like, if you see an enemy and you approach from behind, you get an edge in the battle, and if they get to you first, then you start at kind of like a handicap almost.
Yep.
So you're going around through that. Is it easy to avoid any of those things, or do you have to basically encounter everything that you see?
You don't have to encounter, like if you go into like thinking the last area I was in, and this square partition along the path that you end up taking in this temple thing, not temple. The word's escaping me, but you have this grid, and all 4 monsters are in it, and each one of them has their kind of just random patrol route within there. If you wait for them to clear out of a corner, you can walk by them.
Okay.
But I would say, since you need as much experience as possible, it's a waste of time to not kill them on your way.
Okay.
But still, the option is there. Yeah. But I would say that the no world map issue that I had with it is kind of a greater whole issue, in the sense that there's no world map, but there's also like a false sense of open worldness.
Okay.
So there's not necessarily a need for it, but you can still get lost where things are, because they'll say, "Hey, go back to here."
Sure.
Like, go back to a gathering tent, and I say, "Okay, where the hell is that?"
Yeah, it's very much like, even just at the very beginning of the game, I remember them. Like, I'd only been to 2 locations, was like the starting town, and then like the little area that you meet Setsuna the first time. And there was like, it's definitely very much an old school, like original Final Fantasy, where they just don't give you any hints. Well, they'll like tell you things in conversation, but yeah, if you're not paying attention from that anyway, even if I had been to like a handful of places, I probably would not have remembered where I was supposed to go just from the name, just because I'm not conditioned to do that so much anymore with games today. It's a lot more hand holding going on as you're playing through the game, and at least arrows pointing you where you should go, or markers. But yeah, just even in that little bit of moment, it took me a second to realize, it's like, oh, okay, they mean just like at where I just was, they just want me to go back there. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But I could see how that would get crazy.
What's kind of interesting about Setsuna, obviously, like Tokyo RPG Factory's goal was to hew toward all those old school sensibilities, like lack of objective direction and all those kinds of things. But I don't feel like we have a really good example in the industry of a game that captures just pure, unadulterated old school gameplay with like a few modern conventions to just be a little friendlier to the player. Like, you know what, here's a battle system that's directly reminiscent of Chrono Trigger, but you have objective markers on like a mini map. I feel like you either go super modern stuff like FF15 or the Atelier series, something that's just a really modern take with everything being different, or it's strictly old school. There's not very much in between that I can think of.
I think Dark Souls would be the closest, because technically it's a JRPG.
I mean, technically,
technically, but it doesn't hew. It doesn't hew to the spirit of what we mean when we say
I would say that it does. I mean, not superficially, but I mean in terms of just not telling you what you need to do. and just being unforgiving and letting you having you figure stuff out for sure.
Well, the big counter to that is that Dark Souls is kind of this open concept where you just go and defeat everything, as opposed to like a sort of narrative flow. And I'm sure I know there's a cult following that's probably just going to burn me for saying it, but because I know there's an underlying story throughout the whole
Yeah,
thing.
but that's not the focus.
Yeah,
Absolutely is not. Even if people think they are, it is. It's absolutely not.
I need anime tropes in my JRPGs. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just need character. They can bend the character molds. They can break out of the mold a bit. And,
As long as they end every sentence with then you're good.
yeah. Or they're just or they wear clothes that don't make any sense for
Buckles
for
everywhere.
combat. I need those tropes, Will. I need those tropes.
That's true. That's true.
But
Do you imagine a Dark Souls that actually did that?
Oh, man.
That would be
yeah.
amazing.
a four man boy band quartet as your protagonists with black leather and spiky hair.
God.
Yeah, but Setsuna doesn't really. I mean, that's more of the Tetsuya Nomura philosophy of character design in the last decade, and Setsuna. Having only played a little bit of it at E3 myself, I think I'm the least experienced of it among the three of us here. It does seem to have a certain purity toward it in both its character designs, its environment designs, especially with the whole innocent cleansing that snow conveys. The whole game being set in winter, like it seems it's almost like a modest game. That's just kind of the vibe I get, along with the melancholy tone and the theme of sadness, the theme of silent resignation. There's also just this it's modest, right? Like the characters have clothing that seems appropriate for their jobs, and nobody's like overly sexualized. There's no focus on having this kind of boy band protagonist to be different. It's just very like contained within itself, and it knows what it wants to be.
Yeah, that was my impression.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I think that's true. That's probably the surest way to hew close to the spirit of the original, the great JRPGs of long ago, is to take away all that visual fluff, the stuff that kind of just comes across as marketing to me, like having these super flashy characters that look great on action figures and look great fan art, where it's more like, let's just drill down to like the portraits of these characters, like literally the portraits in dialogue moments, and just have it be very simple, very dialogue driven. I think that's
an extremely elegant. Like I loved the art style. As soon as I saw it, I just fell in love with that. Now even just the difference of the speech bubbles, just to being more that kind of slate with the kind of frost on detail on the outside, just how different and not in your face as being like this is a speech bubble. It was just more like a very tastefully done compared to a lot of games that try to go back to old school JRPG. But it was a fresh new take on a lot of the interface even.
Regardless of how it's been critically received, and it has been generally pretty positive. I feel like Tim's score of 8 is kind of right in line with a lot of other websites. I really do hope that the game sells well relative to Square Enix's expectations, because I want Tokyo RPG Factory to continue doing what it's doing. Like, I don't want this to just be like a one-off project. I want them to say, okay, we've done the Yuna thing, like hewing close to this theme of sacrifice and sorrow in a snowy landscape. Now let's do something that's a little more like Rogue Galaxy, or like FF12, where we're mixing a little bit of air flight and science fiction elements with like a medieval sort of landscape and setting. Like, explore some of those other settings that have become iconic and just overdone by so many different franchises, so many different games, and kind of drill down to the roots of what made those games special. I'd love to see like what is the Tokyo RPG Factory take on Ni no Kuni? What's their take on Rogue Galaxy? Or what's their take on more of like a modern day Tokyo Persona type game? Like, that's maybe a little modern for what they're trying to do, but I would love to see what they do next, taking lessons from this game and seeing like, okay, well, clearly, although this is true to the spirit of the old games, people really don't want to grind 10 levels to defeat the werewolf, and just like refine and just I want to see them refine those elements, because now they get the chance to be like, okay, modern audience, give us your honest feedback. Like, here's the game that you played in 1989. What about it do you not like anymore? Like, what things can you start and to really perfect it.
Yeah, and going off of that, for what it's basically for how dedicated it was to what came before it and what started a lot of interest in games. What did Setsuna do that was unique unto itself, Tim? Like, what were some cool mechanics in this that you either haven't seen before or haven't seen in a long time that were exemplified in this?
I think probably the coolest thing was I wouldn't say this was a subtle thing either, but in terms of combat, you had those momentum points,
Mm-hmm.
and it gave a more an even further significance to how much time you spend doing anything in there. When you have your ATB bar full is the only time when these momentum points will start collecting.
Oh,
And
okay.
the benefit of having them is that they do put out more damage. You can use them to do more damage with basic attacks, which makes a big difference in comparison to the spells like fire and things that end up using MP. It's a very precious thing when you get further on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So these momentum points almost become a necessity, but they're risk reward because it takes you time to get them, and you can't just collect them from a fight before. They're relative. Their gathering is relative to the fight. So you have these boss fights like with this werewolf. It's all based on timing, and that thing is that werewolf was attacking me, twice every turn I could do. So having to wait another half turn was just almost suicide. So you have this element that you want to use, but you can't because the game won't let you, or you can't. It's I don't want to say it hasn't been done before, but with the circumstances of the game and how relative each boss is, it's a very cool sort of strategy that you have to implement in certain ways or not implement at all.
Okay.
I just had a really cool sort of experience with it. Sometimes I felt like I was doing crazy things that I hadn't even noticed until I did them, and then sometimes I realized I was doing the stupidest thing I could have ever done. But it's just a really cool mechanic. I am sold on it.
Yeah, that was something that immediately caught my attention when I was playing it too, and that I didn't get it, I wasn't able to fully understand its uses or even actually get to use it to the degree that it probably, or even like when it is it three of them? I think you can get up to 3 points that you can store.
Oh, yep.
So I don't think I ever hit three when I was playing through it, but yeah, so basically it functions like a limit break, but only for that fight, essentially, right? And you can use it either early and get a little bit of boost from it, or you can use it for these really impressive additions to
Yep.
the fight.
Yeah, and I think the best strategy I came up with them is just so people might take this and use it, which would be pretty beneficial. I think is when you get your ATB filled, give it a little bit of time, just let it gather each time, and then use an ability.
Hmm.
So you can have it, like especially with longer fights, because when you get to that point, your MP is going to be gone, and he's still going to have health, and you're still going to have to kill him, but you won't have anything left except for basic attacks. So you have that stuff built up late in the long battles, because there are plenty of long battles. And it's terrible to lose those long ones. I haven't played a game like this in a long time, and it was just a disheartening feeling to go so long against somebody just to get screwed over on a technicality or a lack of
Uh,
resources, or things like that.
so if you
But
hadn't been reviewing it, would you have stopped playing this for a couple days? Were, were there times that would have happened?
oh man,
That's the vibe I'm getting. That this was a burden in as many ways as it was a joy.
yeah. But that actually kind of leads me to another element of the game that was quite unique. I wouldn't say it's completely a fresh thing, but it was a unique implementation because it kind of put everything you need in an RPG into sort of one routine function. It was a really cool idea. When it comes to when it comes to any RPG, you need money, you need abilities, and you need materials, essentially.
Hmm.
And what they had was a system where you would you would gather materials from everything that you fought. These kind of just standard garbage vendor trash things.
Hmm.
You take them to the vendor, sell this stuff, and you get a ton of money. But essentially, what you're doing is giving this vendor all of your things to store, and then your vendor becomes your vault for creating Sprite Knights and tech and things. And then you can take that money to the other vendor and buy weapons.
Interesting.
So it kind
So
of
you
puts
got like
everything
a
in a nice
pawnbroker.
funnel. Yeah. And it's really nice because you don't have to carry around everything. You don't have to worry about going back to the vault and getting everything to make these abilities and spells and things. You just go to this guy, sell him everything you have in materials, and then he says, "Okay, you've sold me all these. I have these available for you." It's great.
That adds some context to what they were telling us, or what they were telling Will at E3, that one of the kind of cool collectible elements of the game was that every enemy has a certain set of items that they can drop, and there's hundreds of these
Oh,
unique
that's right.
collectible
I totally
materials.
forgot
And I
about
was
that.
like, and I was thinking when they said that, like, that's cool, but like, why is that important?
Well,
Like, why would I
yeah,
need to
that's
chase that?
true. Well,
But
the
if
the reason that she had mentioned that to me was because she said this is a nightmare of a game for completionists because of the number of ways that you can like there's different ways you can kill things, correct? Like
Hmm.
there's like exact kills and overkills and all that kind of stuff. But what she
Yeah,
was
that,
saying was that certain creatures will drop certain items if you kill them certain ways. And this will happen multiple times. So there's times where you could have passed this one area where these creatures were and you had to kill them with an overkill, but if you didn't do that, then you too bad you never get that item. So you have to play through the game again if you want that trophy.
so, then those must be the items, or like some of
Yeah.
the materials that you actually craft, like your sprint necks and other things
Mhm.
out of.
mhm.
That's cool. That's definitely a unique element. That makes
Oh man.
it has. I have like traumatic memories, like PTSD of monster farming to get the FF10 platinum. So like this feels, it worries me a little bit because on paper it sounds kind of like that, where we have to like grind materials and find, um, just let's go monster hunting for the purpose of collecting things. But I imagine it's not that bad in the actual
Yeah.
game.
The world is nowhere near as big as Ten's world is, so you don't have to worry about that kind of uh, grinding. Like, really, honestly, you're going to end up doing stints of grinding along the way, thanks to the bosses. So it's going to be kind of par for the course anyway. So
That's
if you
fair.
get to the end and you're going to have to do a little bit more, it's not going to be, like going through all those
Yeah,
Final
you're
Fantasy X
conditioned
bosses
by
again.
that point, huh?
Yeah, you just lock in. Okay, let's do this, guys.
Nice.
All right. So any other final thoughts you got on Setsuna, Tim, before we
Um,
move on?
uh, I don't know. I just say it's a solid attempt at what gaming used to be, and like I remember I wrote it in my review. It's a symbol of what made classic games classic, what made them stick around, what made people remember them, and this has something special to it. And like I'm just gonna echo what you said, Kyle. I really want Tokyo RPG to keep doing things like this
hmm
because they have. I don't want it to become routine, but I want it to be a good routine in the sense that they keep making good games. And they've already proven that they know what to do with that on that front. So I just want to see them keep doing it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
agreed. I hope they get the leeway. I hope they get the leeway to do that. I hope Square sees the value in continuing that kind of push. It is interesting that they came to that game a little late. I mean, they said in my interview with the creative director at E3 that they looked at the fact that games built in the spirit of JRPGs by indie developers and kind of populating Steam sort of made them realize that they had been ignoring the fact that there was a market for these things. Like they thought, well, we're the original masters. Why aren't we doing more of this? And that was the whole genesis for the idea. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to claim yourself to be the masters of the space and you're into making games that pay homage to those classics, you gotta prove it. I don't think Setsuna is good enough or classic enough to really make that kind of dominant statement. I feel like it's coming out. Some people are excited for it.
Hmm.
It's not exactly exploding on people's radars. At least my perception is that it's not making a ton of waves, and it's not the perfect game people wanted it to be. So let's see, stab two at it. Let's see
Hmm.
if you really can make that perfect homage.
Sure.
Exactly. It's the debut. And as we all know, Uncharted Drake's Fortune wasn't a big hit either.
It's true.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that also scored an 8 on most sites.
And now, yeah, and now I'm wondering what does Tokyo RPG Factory's Uncharted 4 look like?
Oh,
But yeah, I mean,
Funny
no
enough.
pressure, guys.
at the if you were rating them against any other brand, well, it's hard to call them a brand new developer, but they are. For this being their entry game, for the first game that they've come out with, that's a pretty good statement that they made and a good promise to what the future holds. So I'm really excited to see where they go. Like you guys, can't wait to see more. Hopefully, Square backs them to let them make a lot more awesome old school JRPGs. So moving from that other, well, so that was like that's like the quintessential type of like old school JRPG homage that we got actually just recently. But you two guys have been playing a different series, which you're gonna have to help me with the name because I totally forgot what it's called.
Okay, I'll jump in here. So the series that I'm playing right now, or the game rather, is called The Legend of Heroes: Trails of Cold Steel.
Okay.
And we just colloquially call it Trails of Cold Steel because The Legend of Heroes is this much larger JRPG franchise, kind of like a Final Fantasy. It's just made by Falcom, so it's played by much less people,
Okay.
and is less well known. But yeah,
So
Trails of Cold Steel.
so why has it grabbed your attention? And Tim, you were the one that originally reviewed this game for us, correct?
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
I think what it does so well is not only does it have and it's been a little while since I've played it, so I'm gonna kind of stay away from talking in detail about the combat. But what made that game special for me was how fully realized the whole concept is. It's like that 1,000-page science fiction fantasy masterpiece that you read, and you go into every little detail and you absorb it because it's great. Every single little bit, everything has a beginning, everything has a history, everything has a reason,
Yeah,
and that's
it
the
really
big thing.
it really is kind of absurd. I mean, it's even to a greater amount of detail than something like Persona 4, which for people listening to this cast who've played maybe Persona 4 Golden in recent years, I think that's a useful place to start when describing Trails of Cold Steel
Oh,
because
okay.
the series is much older than Persona. It goes back to a game that was originally called Dragon Slayer, and it's been through all these iterations, and they've just always been these massive classical JRPGs. With Trails of Cold Steel, which you can consider to be an offshoot trilogy or an offshoot series, they're definitely playing a lot more with this idea of social bonding between the characters. The main cast of Trails is they're literally students at like an academy, in this case, a military academy on this continent. So they go through sort of daily school life, and you can choose as the player optionally who you want to spend your limited amount of time with to get to know them better to strengthen that bond. When Tim says that it's a fully realized game with a really big scope, that I cannot agree more with, and that is really what's striking to me. I think I started playing the game just because I was looking for I guess I was looking for a single player JRPG to fill a void between now and Final Fantasy 15. And this is something that popped up on my radar a little while back because of its similarities to Persona, and I just never got around to it. But as I'm playing through it now, it has these connections to so many games that came before it, and it melds them all together in the very best way. I think when we talk about a universe that's so large and a mythology that's so deeply explored with so much dialogue and so much history and so much lore. That really speaks to Star Ocean for me. Again, not a series that really a ton of people have played or enjoy, but what Enix has always done with that series going back to the early days of 1 and 2 is fill that world with so much lore and intrigue and character politics and regional politics that was always there if you care to look for it. I mean, Trails of Cold Steel, the closest comparison would probably be calling it the JRPG equivalent of an epic novel because there's so much reading. The pace is a little slow sometimes because of that, but I've never felt bored while reading these things because it's so well written, it's so well localized, and they do the things that they dive into extreme detail about the cities, the politics, the armies, and their relationships. It's never useless. Like it always sort of comes back and means something later. And this main cast of high school age students, as you unravel their backstories throughout the game, you find that they've got their own connections to the broader world around them. So in that sense, with the scope and everything, it's fully realized. But that also gets down to like a system level with the combat and with the character links. To touch on the combat part of it first, Yeah, you basically have to start with FF10 as your base part of
Hmm.
that formula.
Hmm.
It's turn-based. You can see the turn order. You can manipulate the turn order by casting haste or by delaying enemy attacks, things like that. So that's the same, but you also have freedom of movement on the battlefield, but
Oh,
you expend a turn to do so. So the way that could take place is an enemy might start casting a fire spell, and it takes him a few turns to charge that fire spell. Well, in the meantime, you can see the area of effect targeting circle
okay.
within which your characters will get harmed. So you have an opportunity to either spend a turn moving out of the circle or decide, I think I'll be fine. I think I can heal through that, and I'm going to spend my turns just continuing to attack them. Similarly, your abilities, like you've got some characters who maybe a lightning spell rather than being a like a single target bolt, it might be like a column shape. So you actually have an opportunity to, when I select Judgment Bolt, I then get to line up this column and like point it. Let's see, do I point it at these two enemies? Do I point it at this one enemy over here because he's a little more of a threat to me? Can I manipulate the targeting to try to squeeze as many people into it as possible, which is totally something you do in like every battle. So it's almost like taking the 10 formula of just turn-based purity and layering some MMO sensibilities on it with those targeting radii and targeting lines. Um, it also adds a lot of weight to your choices because if you decide to move, that expends a turn. Like you've just lost that opportunity to do something else. Similarly, most magic spells in the game have to be charged. None of them are instant cast. So if I decide to cast Volcanic Fire, I'm making the conscious decision to say, I'm not actually going to get this spell off for another 7 turns. And in that meantime, that character is immobilized and they can't do anything. So by virtue of that, the choices you make have so much more weight to them, and it's much easier to
Hmm.
like make mistakes, right? Because it's harder to come back from the wrong strategic
Sure.
move.
Huh.
The
That's,
systems, though, layer on top of that. So, like the persona thing with the social links,
yeah.
choosing to spend time with people during the school day will strengthen the bond between them. You level up, one, two, three, four for the strength of their bond. And in battle, you can sort of attach yourself to another party member and say, like, we're a duo right now. If my attack happens to stagger an opponent, my partner might come in with a second attack that's just totally free and doesn't waste a turn. Or if our bond is much higher, they might use the ability auto tier or auto cure basically to just heal me when incoming damage comes in, maybe 50% of the time. I'll
Okay.
recover some health back just automatically. And that social link applies not just between the main character and everyone else, it also applies between each of the individual characters.
Huh.
And you have less of a chance to manipulate that, but like over the course of the game, I do see like Y character and Z character are at this stage in their relationship, and that has just sort of naturally evolved that way. Or maybe I've pushed it along a little bit by keeping them in battle together quite a bit. Um,
Hmm.
God, I mean, I'm not even touching on the materia system. I call it the materia system. It's called quartz, but like it's kind of a homage to FF7. I mean, you're filling the character's equipment slots with gems that contain either stat boosts or abilities. Um, you there's some light weapon crafting, there's cooking, there's fishing. So like yeah, at a systems level, the scope is just unbelievable, and it is
Sounds like
truly.
10 games put together.
But it sort of does feel that way, but at the same time, it's like those things all very seamlessly blend. Like
Yeah.
when I think about the combat, it's like the fact that you have all that strategic depth. Like I can go into a dungeon, spend 10 minutes or so in the menu deciding, all right, you're going to be my tank. This character is going to be my sort of crafty ninja type with really high attack speed. Lately, what I've been doing with the main character is I've just outfit all of his quartz slots with gems that have a chance to inflict a status effect. So like at any time I could hit an enemy and they could get poison, strength down, movement down, speed down, faint, sleep, like just confusion, like all those things could
Hmm.
just randomly be applied to them at any time. So he's become like this just plague doctor basically. um, so yeah, there's all that freedom of choice, but then I'm finding that like because of that freedom and because you can freely swap quartz between any of the party members, none of them are useless. Like the game kind of forces you to use maybe 5 of them for this section of the game, maybe 4 others for this section of the game, and you can freely interchange all their equipment. So you never really have to neglect any characters. They're all really well written with awesome backstories. And with a few quirks and exceptions, the battle system is just awesome because it does successfully take that turn-based formula of 10 and say, this formula by its very nature gets predictable like it does. I mean, 10 is not the most strategically deep Final Fantasy game,
Sure.
but when you layer on top of that the tough choices you have to make when it comes to movement and what to do with your turn, on top of that, you've got the customization of the materia, as I call them. On top of that, you've got which characters am I bonding at the moment? How are they connected? Where should I start the battle in terms of like placing them? Because you can adjust like the battle formation, so to speak, on that grid. All those things just come together to deeply complexify the system and make it much more rewarding, I think. And it's just like I've spent I think my game clock is just shy of 60 hours, and from talking to Tim about my progress, I'm sort of kind of coming up on the end, but it seems like there's probably a good 20-25 hours left still. And that time has gone by so quickly, I've never felt like combat was a slog. I've gone out of my way to fight groups, never getting tired, like, oh, I just want to get through this area. I'm going to run past these enemies. It's always been like, oh, I'm going to go kill that guy. Oh, I'm going to go kill that guy. Oh, this guy might drop some loot. He might drop some quartz that I don't have yet. And it's just kept me so engaged all the way through. And the way it seems that it's going to continue that way.
Sounds like the perfect JRPG, how you're talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it does have its problems. One thing that I've started to come across as the bosses have gotten a little harder is that they rely really heavily on status effects themselves. So like the gimmick of a boss tends to be, does it freeze the party every turn? Like, does it apply confusion all the time? Does it apply nightmare all the time? And so like there's no way to know that going into a fight. Like in each RPG, it's just boss fight and then you have to figure it out for yourself. But I've literally had fights where it's like, this is virtually impossible for me to beat with my current setup, so I need to reload a previous save and go back, and it's literally as simple as I didn't have accessories that prevent freeze, so now I'm going to go get those, and now the battle is somewhat trivial. Not every fight is like that, but there have been some that rely a little too heavily on that gimmick, and it's just a matter of, okay, just turn off the system, reload now that I know what the trick is.
Sure.
So that's kind of unfortunate, but yeah, it's definitely scratching that Persona itch a little bit. I mean, it really prays at the altar of both Persona, literally down to the fact that you can do like 2 character bondings during the day and like 1 in the evening. It's got, of course, the 10 system. It's got the Star Ocean sort of scope and lore. And FF7 materia, yeah, but it does blend all those things seamlessly. I think that's the big takeaway from the game, is that it manages to pray at the altar of all these different properties, but yet still feel like a unique and exciting game.
Okay.
It almost feels like a reflection, actually, on the past odd decade or two of RPGs, which is a kind of a fun moment for that, because we're coming up on so many weird, unique new titles like FF15, Persona 5 is another one of those, and
Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah, 7. Yeah,
That new game.
New properties, yeah. It just, to me, this feels like a chance to like just synthesize all the stuff that has come before and kind of just like appreciate all these games that I've kind of individually fallen in love with, and then they're all wrapped up in this nice package with an interesting world. So it's a good breathing opportunity. It's also weird because it's a PS3 game that technically released 3 years ago in Japan, so it kind of looks like shit compared to a lot of other modern games.
But you can play it on Vita, right?
Yeah, you can. And actually, it holds up really well on Vita. The only difference between the 2 versions is slightly longer load times. Like, it hangs for an extra second or 2 when a battle is starting, like that kind of thing. But yeah, cross save works like identically to FF10 remaster.
Is it cross-buy?
It is not cross-buy.
Oh man, that'd be so nice.
That would be really sick. Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna play my PS3 again.
well, see, yeah, but that's an interesting point because like I hadn't touched my PS3 in years. It's been the last time I played through an entire game front to back on PS3. I'm trying to remember when The Wolf Among Us came out because I feel like that might have come out
I
after the PS4 launched or like right around the same time.
think it was right after.
Because that would be maybe that game, but like other than that, I can't think of a game that I've done front to back on the PS3. So this has been kind of for that reason, it's been sort of fun to go back.
Mhm.
I also feel like it's a great time for people to jump into this series if they're interested because there are two more sequels,
Okay.
one of which is about to come out this fall. I mean, this is just the delay you get from localizing them.
Sure.
But Trails of Cold Steel 2 comes out in September, and then Trails of Cold Steel 3, presumably another 90-hour RPG, was just announced to be in development like a week ago. So I'm like playing through the first game, and it's like new and exciting to me. And I go on Twitter, and it's like Trails of Cold Steel 3 has been announced and is in active development. And I'm like, good lord, I'm gonna be in this universe for quite a while, aren't I?
So so this is just like part of a ongoing franchise. Is that what it was?
Yeah, the Legend of Heroes. When I say the Legend of Heroes, it's not like the same level as like a Final Fantasy where it has
Mhm.
core installments. The difference between the two series is that with Legend of Heroes, they tend to come in sets of three. So it's like if you have Final Fantasy as the analogy, it would be as if like if four, five, and six all had the same sort of running story, but then seven, eight, nine were something totally different. That's kind of
Okay.
how Legend of Heroes goes. But then even within that structure, there's branch offs. Like as far as I know, Trails of Cold Steel exists in a different universe from like the mainline series. But like the trilogies of the mainline series
Mhm.
kind of are in the same universe. So yeah, it's most similar to like a Final Fantasy, just even more
Sure.
complicated.
Okay. So you don't need any experience with the
No, no, no,
previous games at all.
definitely not. And in fact, and even if you wanted to, you really, in some ways, you couldn't because only about half of them, maybe even less than half, have even come to North
Mm.
America or
Okay.
have been localized. So a lot of them haven't, just because of Falcom's a small publisher, and lately Xseed has been taking up the localization duties, and
Mm.
they're a small studio. They work on a lot of things. So
Yeah.
I remember there's another there's another offshoot of Legend of Heroes called Trails in the Sky,
Hmm.
and that with that series, it took Xseed like 4 years to localize the second game because
Jeez.
it's just that massive. And I mean, literally, I wanna almost look up how large that script was because I remember reading it, or they had like a picture of the pile of documents, um, and it was just absurd. Like it really is for the novel reader in all of us. These are games meant to be read, but in all honesty, like they're written well enough to hold up to that. Like they're really made to be enjoyed over those
Well, that's
massive
exciting.
stretches.
I just started the third book of the Witcher books. So I mean, literally reading an RPG
Yeah, for
right
sure.
now. So I'm actually really excited about that.
Well, there's also apart from Trails in the Sky, there's that trilogy of Legend of Heroes that came out right around the time the PSP launched. And
Hmm.
I remember playing those during college.
It's
Playing
interesting.
quite a
Did
bit.
you I remember the first of those games called A Tear of
Vermilion.
Vermilion. Yeah, because that came out like really close to launch. And I did play that one, but I actually didn't actually wasn't aware that so like I'm trying to think. I think that's technically and like this gets, just how Final Fantasy has different numbering systems. Like it's kind of the same thing here, where the Legend of Heroes, A Tear of Vermilion, or Vermilion,
Yep.
came out on PSP ostensibly as the first game of this new series, when it was really like the fourth game over in Japan.
Hmm.
Uh, oh, that's interesting though. I didn't realize they brought the successive entries over here as well. Too bad they're on PSP though. How the hell is anyone supposed to play them today?
Now I really don't know, but they were still made by Falcom.
Hmm.
They
So they've
Yeah,
might.
been around a while working on this series.
Huh. Well, they could have been added to the store, digital downloads or stuff, but
I
who
don't think
knows?
so. I think that was well before they started pushing everything digitally. It was one of those many RPGs that suffered, much like Crisis Core did, in not having a digital version.
Uh,
Thankfully, you can get a couple of them on Steam. You can get Trails in the Sky 1 and 2 on Steam, and that's probably the easiest way to play them for most people. It's also the
Mm.
cheapest way. I feel like I mean,
Probably.
they're all the same thing. Like they're all like these are legitimately 90-hour RPGs, like bog standard. Like that's not completionist playthrough. That's not like
Yep.
going out and about to conquer every little corner of the world. It's just that's how long the story will take most people. Kind of like Persona 4
Yeah.
clocked in at like 80 or 83 for me. Um,
Hmm.
but it even feels more impressive because it's taking you on this journey across massive, massive worlds as opposed to Sona's very tight sort of urban neighborhoods and little towns and hamlets.
Awesome. Well, I think I have another game I have to play now.
Yeah,
Oh
man.
yeah.
That's the thing. And really it's like a state, when we talk about like the state of the RPG, Trails of course feels like the ultimate synthesis of basically all the RPGs we've been playing since the year 2000 because it's got those hallmarks of
Mm.
FF10, Star Ocean, of FF7, of what's what I'm missing? Well, it's got even. I mean, you could even liken the movement to things like Fire Emblem and Tactics to some extent.
And even
Yeah.
Tails. There's a lot of
Yeah,
Tails
yeah,
in there
that's
too.
true. Yeah, and like yeah, that's the other one I was trying to think because like it's got more of an anime styling, more of an anime art style similar to the Tales series.
With the link system too.
Oh God, that's true. I mean, the battle system is like if you took Star Ocean's like battlefields with the Tails camera angle
Hmm.
and FF10's turn-based and like Fire Emblem's movement. I mean, it's pretty wacky when you put it all together,
It's
but I
also
think
got
that's
like you said. I was thinking of like AOE's and MMOs
oh
and
yeah.
being able to move
Yeah, that
around.
too.
So
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like, I mean, I'm sure I will. I'm kind of on this sin right now where I want to chip away at my RPG backlog, and that just happened to start with this game. But
it's a big chip to knock off.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah, it's a whole ceramic tile of that pot. But it's like I almost feel like I could finish this series, like play 2 and 3 over the next year or whatever, and then sort of just put down like RPGs prior to 2010 for a while because it does synthesize so many of them into one game. It's like you're really getting the best of all those worlds in like one series. It's kind of like a greatest hits of the last decade or so. At least that's how I feel playing it. I mean, I'm really really positive in the game. I don't know where I would ultimately score it if had been the one to write that review, but I might be even a little more positive than Tim was. I might be in like a 9.5 range with this.
Yeah.
Huh.
And honestly, if I had reviewed it on PS3, it probably would have been positive. I remember some of my issues that I had with it were technical, like performance wise, not
Yes.
based on the gameplay at all.
Yeah, you had
And
two that said frame rate inconsistencies,
oh yeah.
long and frequent load times, and last one you said difficulty lessens later in the game.
That I would also agree with. It's starting to get a little bit cakewalk. It was legitimately challenging. Like even random encounters at the beginning,
Mhm.
I was like, not getting my ass kicked, but at least having to think tactically about each of these enemy compositions,
Hmm.
decide what abilities would take care of them quickest, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's just that my levels got ahead of things, or I think it might be more so I've just kind of I'm learning, it's kind of like a Bloodborne effect where like the second half of Bloodborne to me
Oh
was
man.
so much easier than the first
Yeah.
half because you just hit that curve where it's like I get how this works now and I have an innate sense for how my abilities and their elemental attributes take care of these kinds of enemies like
Sure.
what situation is Gale good for? What situation is Judgment Bolt good for? What situations should I swap this character out for this character? And just having those be second nature, I think, is making the game just flow very quickly. In a sort of negative way, I would say it is getting a little bit too easy, but I'm a guy who's very like purist when it comes to playing on normal difficulty because I really like to have whatever experience the developers sort of intended me to have as my first outing. And this is not a game I plan on replaying, so
Ah,
for the moment, I'll just continue with how it is and hope they throw some wrenches in there.
you don't want to go for the trophy for an extra
Oh God,
500 hours?
I haven't even been looking at it because I know that like it just the structure of this game tells me that the platinum is probably pretty similar to Persona's, which would mean there are multiple points at which, oh, you're just screwed now. You have to start the game over because you missed
Hmm.
like a single conversation, or oh, you didn't catch that swordfish in chapter 4.
Yeah.
Guess that story event in chapter 6 won't happen now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Actually, the most annoying, actually, the one of the few annoying things about getting that platinum I've researched is having to get like perfect scores in each chapter.
Oh yeah,
That's the hard part.
that's a good
And
point. Yeah.
it's not really about like missing a little thing here. It's about missing a lot in each chapter. Like they have a checklist online, and it's kind of gross. It kind of defeats the purpose, especially the first playthrough of going through it.
That's a funny quirk about, and I wouldn't call it a negative. It's just like a quirk about the game is that you do get graded on your performance as a class when you go on these field trips to the different places. So like after the chapter, they kind of give you a report card and say you did this, you did this, you did this. You get these points, and you get a B or you get an A. And all of mine have been B's so far, which is a
Yep.
little bit weird because I've gone out of my way to complete everything on my quest list and like get all the questions correctly, like kind of in that persona tradition, you can like give wrong or right answers to
Hmm.
test questions and all that kind of thing. But I only ever get B's, which is really weird because on some of these like field studies, again, it's a military academy, like shit goes down at the place that they go to, and these students end up like acting as a counterterrorism unit or like saving some kidnapped royalty. And then you come back to school and it's like, yeah, you get a B. You get a B for helping the evacuation effort of this city. It's just like just kind of tonally weird. 'Cause I'm like, come on, these guys are like national heroes at this point.
You
What's the deal?
can't let it get to their heads. I mean,
Oh,
They're always trying to put a young JRPG trope character down.
hmm,
yep.
well, that's a good segue into our next topic for people just having to start from the bottom and learn your way through the wherever you're fighting. I guess is Final Fantasy 14 just got a new patch, and it came with a thing called, was it Palace of the Dead?
Yes,
A
and
new addition to it.
a new dungeon called Palace of the Dead.
So yeah,
This
Final
is a
Fantasy
fun.
14. Well, for Kyle's, he's obsessed with it, rightfully so. I would be if I was playing it at the moment.
But you know what's funny about it is that Tim reviewed this game too on
Yeah, pretty
PS3.
much. Good thing we
It's
had
just
you
a
on for our
it's a running
JRPG
theme.
talk. Yeah.
You've
That
reviewed
was
every single one of these games. We
that
should
was the
just change
longest
the name
review
of
I've ever
this.
written.
Yeah, I remember editing that one. That was a fun project. We should change the name of this podcast to Tim's Review
Yeah, Tim's
Reflections,
reviews. Yeah.
starring Kyle and Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so Final Fantasy 14 in its rebooted phase has been around for a couple of years now. And this
Massive
new
MMO.
massive MMO. In the spirit of FF11, it's very similar to that entry in a lot of ways. This new content type shakes things up because what we usually get is just some routine 2 or 3 dungeons every couple months that are the classic like MMO trinity. You've got your tank, healer, DPS. Dungeon takes about 20-25 minutes, 3 bosses, all that kind of World of Warcraft stuff. What Palace of the Dead does differently is it takes elements of modern roguelike games and combines it with some callbacks to past Final Fantasy games to create this hybrid bottomless dungeon. And they say bottomless, but it's 50 floors at the moment. Each floor is randomized, so like the layout changes every time you go through it. The enemies change. There's hidden traps, like a lot of those classic roguelikes. Treasure chests spawn in random locations, so it's all very fresh. It's all very replayable. It's meant to be something that you can dive into either casually or hardcore and get just a different experience every time you do it. But what kind of fits in with this state of the genre, Chad, is that it's the first time FF14 has really paid homage to its real roots, going back to like the early few games. The user interface when you go to Palace of the Dead, nowhere else in the game, just in Palace of the Dead, is a blue and white sort of. I don't know if the style has a name, but I think Final Fantasy fans know what I'm talking about when I say it's like a classic UI. It's blue with white borders. You've got an 8-bit character icon for whatever your character class is to sort of represent you. The font looks very old school Final Fantasy, so it really pays tribute to that style of gameplay, and it can actually be played solo. That's kind of the hardcore way of doing it, but it is possible. They've made things like potions and Phoenix Downs actually do something. Like the recharge on them is only a few seconds now, where it used to be a couple minutes. So you're actually meant to use potions and Phoenix Downs to actually get through the dungeon. And if you're going in by yourself, you're going to be spamming potions to keep yourself alive. In some respects.
Super nice that they actually gave you a reason to hold on to those things now
Yeah,
too.
sure, for sure. Yeah, the prices, as you can imagine, the prices on the market board for for even simple things like high quality potions and elixirs has spiked pretty noticeably, at least on our
I
server.
wonder if my character still has some.
Probably.
I don't know. I usually just like scrapped them immediately because I didn't. My inventory was always full.
Yeah, I just kind of they accrue for me when I go into like really low level dungeons in like the roulettes and stuff, and I just don't miss it. But I'll like look back in and oh, I've got 10 potions, 10 elixirs. The hell do I even do with this stuff? Yeah, I mean, for those who don't play, those items, while classic Final Fantasy staples, are essentially useless in the MMO. But that's what makes it special. That within Palace of the Dead, they're actually required and like really really useful, especially if you're taking like the solo Dark Souls approach, which I would actually like say that's a pretty apt description. It's not my idea, it's something I saw on Reddit, but Palace of the Dead can be played with up to four, and that's kind of the intended group. But if you go in by yourself and like try to manage the hidden traps and like literally a landmine might explode underneath you and take away 80% of your health as an enemy is approaching you. So all these kind of things can happen. It does kind of feel like a little Bloodborne-y in a way, which is weird for Final Fantasy, but it's like extremely difficult, and you only get to save your progress every 10 floors. So it's definitely it can be as hardcore as you want to make it, I guess, but it can also be pretty casual with just four friends.
Well, that's really cool.
Hmm.
I'm super excited about trying that out later on.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Tim, have you gotten into Final Fantasy much at all since the review way back when?
He's been playing Arcade and crap like that for
Oh man,
at a time.
it's been years since I played Arcade. I actually haven't played Arcade since the PS4 came out, so thanks Sony. But I haven't really played a lot of I haven't played a lot of MMOs, just because I hit the end level for 14, and I couldn't really. And actually, I was in a oh my god, terminology. I was in a guild, for the lack of terminology right now. I was in a guild, and it was pretty established and well founded. I was looking forward to a lot of things, and they were helping me get to 50 at the time and getting me geared and things like that. And we were gonna go and do some raids, and then some politics and some shenanigans happen, and the whole thing split. And now my character is sitting on a server with like no association because everybody left.
Jeez.
I had a similar case actually when I took a break from the game for like 4 months. I came back and the free company had like disbanded. I had no friends. It was lonely for a little bit there.
You should spend the whatever is it like $50 to move a character from server to
Oh,
another
50.
server.
No, I
It's
feel
not
like
50.
It's something like it's something that's like more than what you would expect it to be. But you
I feel like
pay
it's like 20 or 25.
Yeah, that's honestly, unfortunately, that's pretty standard with MMOs. I know WoW, if you wanted to transfer servers, it was a chunk of change too.
well either way, spend that money. You can join our free company. I say our when I don't participate in it at all. I haven't for a while, but
Well, I have you guys telling me about this, and I have Ben trying to get me on his on Ultros with him.
Oh, you don't want to
no,
do
you
that.
want Excalibur.
Yeah, you don't want
Yoshi
to.
P shows up from time to time on
He does.
Excalibur.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
There's actual photo evidence of this.
It was a crazy coincidence about that. His appearance on our server of the game, this Yoshi P is the creative director, happened like 5 minutes after my interview with him at E3. Like they had a game station in that room, and he must have like literally when we closed the door and like left, just turned and like logged into the game for a little bit. So I remember that the TV behind him was like on the menu of the game, and I just thought it was window dressing. I didn't think anything of it. Like it's just it's a TV with the Heavensward logo, whatever. And then I log on to our free company's Facebook page, and everyone's freaking out about how he popped up in Idleshire, and I'm like, but I just saw him. Isn't that cool? That's cooler, right? I just saw the guy.
Yeah.
Just saw. Not as cool,
Here
Kyle.
he is in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
you couldn't
yeah.
get a screenshot of him in real life.
Yeah.
It's true.
Oh my god.
Just a lame photograph.
All right.
I guess you're not wrong.
So I think like with Palace of the Dead, it's Final Fantasy 14 is a very World of Warcraft-esque MMO when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically the WoW formula with some modern tweaks and a Final Fantasy window dressing. With Palace of the Dead, it's sort of it's got that old school RPG difficulty and certainly the callbacks to like the UI of past games, but in terms of its roguelike design and some of the obviously the way you can match with people online and the way you can go in with any party composition, you don't need a healer. You could have three dragoons who all use potions and phoenix downs to keep each other alive. That part of it feels very modern. So as much as they positioned it as like this old school sort of nostalgia trip, I actually feel like it's one of the more modern, refreshing elements in the whole game. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a formula that hasn't been seen in any real MMO. Like this roguelike thing has typically been reserved to single player experiences. So it's very as a passionate fan of the game, it's very heartening to see this new content type because it is kind of a I don't want to say it was sorely needed, but like the rhythm of patches and having the exact same sort of two dungeons in March, two dungeons in April,
Mm-hmm.
story update in May, like that. While all that content is amazing and the team does a really great job, it does get formulaic and a bit predictable, and this does help to shake things up and at least say like the team is actively exploring new ways to make the game exciting, even a couple years after it re-released.
God, yeah, that's so awesome. There's so much there when I get back into playing this. It's just going to be overwhelming.
It's almost like the safe thing for you to do would just be like to wait till the next expansion because then you don't have to feel bad about missing all that content. It'll just jump you ahead through the story to like whatever the new stuff is that everyone's playing.
Yeah,
And then
I
if you go
mean,
back to do that stuff, you'll be like way over leveled and can just stomp all over it anyway.
yeah, I guess there's pros and cons. I kind of want to play through
That's,
everything as it is.
Is
yeah.
the next expansion that close?
No, it's actually probably a ways off. I would say next June.
Because
Oh, yeah, a
Heaven's Word
year?
was just like last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, Heaven's Word last year, and it
Yeah.
seems like they're charting like a pretty rigid 2 year timeline between expansions.
Feels like it came out 2 years ago already.
Yeah, it has. It has been a while. It's fun to think that the story of Heaven's Word is only half over with these continual updates.
Oh, that's a fair point.
So we've got 3.4, 3.5 yet. Um, I don't know, it's an exciting time to be involved in the game, but I will say that it has been refreshing to step away from it in recent weeks and play like Trails of Cold Steel, perfect example. It's like a single player game that I would never have time for if I was really chasing some of those end game grinds, and I'm
Hmm.
really glad I'm taking a break to play that because it's getting me back to like my huddle down on the couch on a Saturday night, just burning through a single player RPG until I can't stay awake anymore.
Yeah, that's definitely the danger that I had playing 14.
Just
Just
don't
like
have a sleep schedule
just
anymore.
days on end where I did nothing but that game.
Man,
Yeah, this
there's
one.
a major advantage to that, though. I remember in college, like the one thing I look forward to, and this is when I played WoW, when I had no soul. I,
Kyle knows what that's like.
I, I always look forward to it, and even I justified it for a lot of reasons. One, I didn't really do anything. I didn't go out to eat. I didn't go do these things. It was $15 for a month of entertainment every
Right.
month.
Yeah,
And I can't say that now.
yeah,
Not even close. Not even close.
Yeah, it is.
And
It is pretty impressive when you think about it like that, because I think that's what people who don't play MMOs don't, or who haven't tried one yet, don't really get. It's like the value proposition there is not like other video games.
hmm
yeah. And I mean, if you're looking at, I would say the average gamer goes through a game a week, right? So if we're looking at that kind of math and you buy four full games a month, that's 100, that's bad math, Tim. Wow. That's $240, right? At
yeah,
least a month, if you're looking at it that way. Even two games would be 120. So
yeah,
$15 a month. And I hear that complaint quite often. And I get it. If you're not playing it, it's a waste of money. But
sure.
if that's what you're doing,
I think
$15 a month is nothing.
yeah, and part of it is I think that I didn't really fully grasp it until I started playing too. Is that there's just way more content than you can imagine compared to other games. Like you
Yeah,
just
there's
feel like it's just kind of like, oh, you're gonna do everything, and you're not gonna play it all that much once you get through like the main grind of some of the stuff. And it's like, no,
Yeah, it's just there's more in most MMOs that are well designed, there's more there than any one person could realistically accomplish. Like there are
yeah,
certainly a few people in FF14 who just don't have anything to do anymore, but there's a
and have
reason for
been
that,
with it
right?
from the beginning too.
Yeah,
Like
right. But
if
that
you
was like
don't, if you haven't
16.
been with it since the beginning, it's like impossible to catch up for some of the stuff where people are.
Yeah, it really
Because
is just the
because some
same.
of that stuff, even like the level or the like the weapons, like those are like months or year long projects that they just have for you to work on. Like it's just crazy. Like there's no games don't do that. Any other types of games don't do that on that scale. And that's just something that's just impossible to really conceptualize until you've started playing through one of those games. But yeah, so Final Fantasy XIV, even though it is an incredibly massive and awesome modern MMO, bringing some awesome callbacks to the originals, the OGs from
Yeah,
back in the day.
what's a cool thing about the three games that we've discussed today is that like if any one person was just gonna sit down and play all three of them, like these are RPGs, or in the case of FF14, an RPG patch that
Hmm.
all came out within like a very close time period of each other, like within the last 6 or 7 months, and you are getting a very different type of RPG experience, like a very different sort of value set, very different sort of philosophies that are still all contained within like the much broader JRPG umbrella. Like Trails of Cold Steel is a very different game from I Am Setsuna, but they're
Hmm.
still like I think a JRPG fan is gonna completely love both of those games. And I would say the same thing for FF14. I feel like it's essential for Final Fantasy fans to at least play some of the basic story and see what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure.
Has me
Final,
looking forward to what's coming, you know? I mean, Final
yeah,
Fantasy 15 coming in September, that's that couldn't be an even further departure from any of
yeah,
these three games that
right,
we've mentioned, right? Like that's what's cool to me about that game is whether it tanks, whether it sucks, whether it's like the next great thing,
yeah,
it's going to be a symbol of like that will be very telling, I guess. Like when FF15 comes out, its level of quality, how it's received by critics, how it's received by fans, that's going to be like even more of a stronger statement about like the current state of RPGs.
hmm,
Because if that game takes off and people love the action elements, they love the new direction, well, then Square has kind of just set the benchmark for JRPGs for like the next 10 or 15 years. And you're going to start to see series like Legend of Heroes, series like Atelier maybe focus a little more on these weirder narrative elements like an all-male cast, or a combat system that's totally action and open world, objective markers and quest markers, all those kinds of
hmm.
things. So it could be a very real barometer for the genre,
I,
whether it's bad or good.
I still can't tell if I just really hope that it does well or if I just don't care about it at this point. Like I just can't figure that out. If I just really have lost all interest in 15 or if I just secretly am saying that and want it to be amazing.
I have a I was feeling a little bit tepid on it like a month ago, and then I watched the episodes of the Brotherhood anime that have come out so far. There's I think three of them out so far, and
They
those do a,
released another one? I didn't see that.
yeah. There's been three. Those do a really interesting job of introducing you to the characters, and like they just watching the anime episodes actually got me a lot more excited than I was to play the game, especially after like the E3 demo and all the problems that the
Yeah, yeah.
demos have been facing. But yeah, I give the anime as a shot because you can burn through them in like 40 minutes.
Hmm. I
And
watched the
those,
first one. I didn't watch the other two yet.
yeah, I feel like they just keep getting better. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would love for it to do well because I want that series to return to form in terms of being like a cultural touchstone, being something that gamers in every single category just look up and pay attention to, whether they play it or not.
Hmm.
But all the evidence is kind of pointing the other way. I mean, all of its playable showings, like you play the episode Dusuke, you play the Platinum demo, you play the E3 demo, and it's like this doesn't feel this doesn't feel like the level of quality from a technical polish standpoint that we
Mm-hmm.
expect from Square Enix. Like if FF15 comes out and it has the same frame rate issues, the same texture problems, the hair jaggies and all that, I'm like, can you imagine if FF10 or FF9 had come out back in the day with those problems? Like
Oh man.
the games just didn't have that to worry about. That's going to feel like a real dent in the armor of this long-standing series if 15 comes out and just is anything less than a rock solid technical package.
Mm-hmm.
Like the concept of a frame rate drop doesn't even exist prior to well, with Final Fantasy prior to like this game. So even that alone makes it hard to get excited for just because it doesn't feel like the pedigree that Square is known for.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy game. That's just really what it comes down to, at least so far.
Should call it Noctis and Friends on an amazing road trip.
Riding in
Noc-
cars with boys.
Noctis, Noctis and Prompto's excellent adventure.
Oh God.
But yeah, it'll be telling. And I mean, I'm way more excited for Persona 5
Oh, for
than I am
sure.
for 15. So that would be cool too. If 15 sucks, then Persona 5 to me will be the game that heralds the new era of JRPGs and comes out and is
It'll.
this bombastic event that says, "All right, we are now the benchmark." So here you go, 2020 and onward.
Mm-hmm.
Do your best to try to match our standard or to follow in our footsteps, taking inspiration.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Tim? You got there on what we talked about? State of the JRPG today? Hopeful? Anything like that?
Oh, most definitely hopeful. I see if this is executed properly, a kind of resurgence to an old form, and that just brings me a lot of joy because there was back in the day no room for anything else except for the success of JRPGs, and now they're trying to find their niche again. And with such a vast market pool, there's really no reason that they can't make it. It can't be successful even.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, if you have like even the charming little game they made, Adventures of Mana, it had a palpable place as well. Yeah, all these things that they're doing right now, all the games, all the JRPGs that are coming out have their place, and they're all so unique, much like they were back in the olden days. I'm going to say it that way. The- but the fact that there's modernization in some, like with Final Fantasy, just to freshen up things and kind of get away from the stigma that came out of 13, it's kind of a good decision. But you have these new things coming from this from Square. It's just like they said that they were the benchmark, and now they have to reclaim it. And it's not just on the technical, crazy frame rate type things now in standard in modern standards, but really just on the standard of integrity and quality as well.
Yeah. Very
They
true.
have it. They're all there. They have it. They just need to keep doing it.
They also need to tell increasingly better stories. I mean, there is a greater pressure on them because a lot of the JRPGs that we remember as classics are partly considered classics because we just didn't have very many great stories and games and great characters to relate to. And there was, I mean, Final Fantasy 7 or even 6, hell, going back to 4 with its character focus, like as comparatively simple as you might consider those stories to be today, they were sophisticated and advanced and eloquent back in their time, and that's part of the reason they're so fondly remembered. The problem that today is that you've got everything from first-person shooters like BioShock Infinite to visual novels like Zero Escape telling equally sophisticated stories. In some cases, depending on who you are and your preference, better stories. So
Mm-hmm.
with the modern RPG, it's I would hate to I kind of would hate to be an RPG developer because it's kind of a back and forth tug. Like, do people love the classics for those sort of conventional tropey characters and arcs? Like, is that what's charming about them, or do they love them retroactively because the stories were amazing for their time? And if that's the case, can we even write some genre defining story in 2016 that just comes and blows people away?
Yeah.
That's a tough question to answer.
And Square is going to find that answer out very soon.
Real quick. Within hours of the midnight release,
Yeah.
they will know.
Awesome. Well, I'd say that was a pretty good discussion on the current state of JRPGs. Definitely still a lot of, I mean, you can clearly see the influence in, even in Western games, for sure. You see the influence and the depth that JRPGs have impacted the game industry and how they still impact it today. And definitely looks like they're not going to go anywhere, which is awesome for gamers everywhere, I would say.
I mean,
Yeah. So, great. Well, thanks for coming on, Tim, and talking about Setsuna and all of the games that you reviewed.
Thanks for having me. It was a delight.
Yeah, it was awesome.
yeah,
So,
for sure. Fun to talk.
right. Uh, I'm trying to think of now what else we got going on. So, any other games that you're going to be reviewing, Tim, coming out?
Actually,
Actually, yeah.
yeah. It looks like I'll be handling Trails of Cold Steel too.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, we might be seeing that within the next couple weeks, actually, in time for a September release. So the timing.
So everybody
Could not have
rush
been
out and play the first one before the
Yeah.
review hits.
Yeah, I think if you
luck rushing
throw
through
your right, if you throw yourself into it, like the moment you finish this podcast, there might still be time.
You're saying there's a chance.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, be sure to check out, if you haven't already, check out Tim's review of I Am Setsuna on PSU.com. Check out all the games that we talked about. I mean, clearly, even though Tim's the only one who fully played Setsuna, I got to play at E3, Kyle got to play at E3. We both really loved our time with it. Kyle and Tim really, really enjoy Trails of Cold Steel. Go check that out. I'm going to check that out at some point. Hopefully it doesn't get lost in my backlog of games.
Put it at the top.
Yeah.
I'll just
put it at the
remind
top. Oh, all right.
Daily.
Just text me every day.
Every morning. Hello. Play Trails.
And play Final Fantasy 14. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you should definitely give that a try and just see what it's about, because you'll love it, I guarantee. So
You have no excuse if you're a series fan. To be
basically,
honest.
yeah. And the stories, even just like in Heaven's Word story, is as good, if not better, than most Final Fantasy story arcs. It's just ridiculous. Like the quality is there in stride. So yeah, go check those games out. And thanks for listening to episode 34 of PlayStation Fix, talking all about JRPGs this week. Be sure to just check out PlayStation Universe itself at psu.com for all PlayStation news and reviews and features and everything that you need. Follow us on Twitter at psu spelled out, so psudot.com. Follow us on YouTube at PSUtube, Twitch for PSU Live. I know our man Ernest has us on Periscope. I don't know if he's doing anything on there after E3's been done, but you can go there.
It's just him in his basement office.
Yeah, pretty much.
Knocking out the news.
I just like adding that since he made one, so I'll talk about that from now on. But yeah, thanks for listening to our episode of PlayStation Fix, and check us out next week on psu.com, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.